Imagine a secret so profound it was ripped from existence, erased from every sacred text, and whispered only in the trembling silence of angels. Before the first grave was dug, before Adam knew sorrow, and long before Cain's hand stained the earth, there was a death not of flesh, but of light. Not on earth, but in the shimmering heart of heaven itself. A being vanished, not exiled, but annihilated, leaving a scar in eternity we were never meant to see. Why is this hidden from every prophet, every scripture? What kind of entity could die where death could not exist? And what truth about God and evil does its very absence reveal? The scriptures we hold dear are filled with accounts of rebellion and fall. Lucifer, the Watchers, humanity's descent in Eden. Yet, strangely absent is any mention of a singular, cataclysmic event preceding them all. We're talking about a being so utterly unmade, so completely removed, that no verse names it, no ancient prophecy dares to speak its truth. This wasn't exile, it was annihilation. A clean slate, an ultimate purge. Why would such a pivotal moment be so meticulously erased from divine memory? Ancient fragments, whispers from forgotten scrolls, hint at a celestial event so violent, it fractured the very foundations of the cosmos. Not a rebellion born of pride, but an infection. A corruption that couldn't be cast out because it wasn't a choice. It was an inherent decay. This being, once glorious before the throne, became something irredeemable, not by defiant will, but by an insidious rot from within. The act of its removal wasn't punishment as we understand it, but preservation. The heavens had to be cleansed, not just from rebellion, but from a spiritual disease that threatened to spread like wildfire through pure light. Consider the silence surrounding this event. Not even Lucifer's epic fall received such a complete blackout. What if this awe hides a deeper memory? A time when holiness wasn't enough to protect one of their own, forcing the Creator's hand in an act of cosmic surgery. Cryptic lines in ancient Aramaic scrolls speak of the spirit consumed by fire, who left no echo, not cast down, not exiled, consumed. This was swift, final, a necessary act lest the corruption spread like a plague. We imagine heaven as unchanging, yet Revelation speaks of war in heaven. What if that was a second conflict, born from the fear that what happened once could happen again? The first death wasn't a casualty of rebellion. It was a containment, a terrifying reminder that even divine realms can be infected, and that God himself had to act as judge and executioner. After that moment, the celestial order shifted. A new, unspoken law echoed through the heavens. Holiness was not just brilliance, but purity under constant vigilance. Angels became more than servants. They became sentinels. Guarding creation, yes, but also guarding each other from ever becoming what that one being had become. Eden's fiery sword, the strict separation between heaven and the fallen, the veiled presence of God in the tabernacle, all are echoes of this heavenly protocol. Protect purity. Contain corruption. Never again. Some ancient rabbinic traditions speak of the flame before the cherubim, not just as a symbol, but a weapon, a barrier to disintegrate anything unworthy. Because something unworthy once came too close, and heaven remembers. Lucifer's rebellion, often presented as the origin of evil, might itself be a shadow, an emulation of what came before, not envy of God, but perhaps a distorted envy of that first being's proximity and its ultimate terrifying demise. The book of Job opens with a strange counsel, where Satan appears among the sons of God. No mention of fear, no caution. Yet, in the unspoken tension, one senses a courtroom that has known ultimate stakes before. What if Satan's test of Job was allowed not just to prove faith, but to prove that evil could now be contained without total destruction? That after the first death, God chose to judge, to allow choice, rather than erase. The first being to die might not have had that option. In Revelation, a third of the stars are swept from heaven, but the fallen are cast down, not destroyed. Why? If God once obliterated a being entirely, why show mercy to Lucifer and his angels? Unless what died first was fundamentally different, not rebellious, but diseased. A being whose very existence had become unredeemable. This would mean that sin, as we understand it, wasn't the first threat. Rebellion followed corruption. Evil wasn't born of choice, but of a mutation, a distortion of light so deep, it had no cure. And perhaps that's why we aren't told. The fragility of even the perfect, once corrupted, is a truth too heavy for human minds. Consider Eden, guarded by a flaming sword. More than just blocking sinners, this imagery suggests a threat greater than human rebellion. The sword wasn't just exclusion, it was quarantine, preventing something deeper from re-entering, something heaven had once dealt with in fire. The serpent in Genesis, more subtle than any beast, the Hebrew Aram, hints at a being stripped of glory, exposed. What if this wasn't the origin of evil, but its messenger? A shadow of that first unmade being, a fragment of the corruption that once stood before the throne? Its whisper was not just temptation, it was a legacy, the echo of what began before the world. The prophet's riddles, Isaiah's morning star, Ezekiel's lament for a guardian in Eden. What if these veiled hints refer to someone far older than Lucifer? A death so ancient and holy that even prophets feared to describe it directly, layering it in metaphors. A fragment from the Dead Sea Scrolls speaks of a spirit who fell in silence, without sound, without judgment. Perhaps silence was the judgment, absolute removal, the kind of judgment so final no name survives. This explains why angels fear to sin, why demons tremble. It's not just reverence, it's memory. They remember the one who wasn't offered rebellion or redemption, only obliteration. The knowledge that some mistakes are beyond correction. God's holiness, a consuming fire, too pure to look upon iniquity. These aren't just descriptions, they are warnings. Because once holiness didn't forgive, it consumed. And the echoes of that first death still ripple through every altar, every temple, every moment of spiritual awe. So why is this hidden? Perhaps because this death introduces a reality too heavy for human minds. That even in heaven, where purity reigns, destruction is sometimes the only option. Such knowledge could shatter us, make us question the very nature of grace. It was buried not to deceive, but to protect fragile minds from the rawest form of divine justice. This is why Jesus' message was so revolutionary. He came not only to forgive sin, but to interrupt a pattern that had once ended in annihilation. His sacrifice wasn't just for humanity. It was for all things in heaven and on earth, to ensure no being would ever have to be unmade again. Mercy would reach where once only silence had been allowed. When Jesus cried out, "It is finished," he wasn't just ending a human sacrifice. He was sealing a cosmic loop, putting an end to the shadow cast by the first being to die in heaven. Christ's blood didn't just cover sin. It covered the memory of what was once too dark to speak. And yet heaven still remembers. The angels still carry that silence, a sacred tremor in their voices. That first death taught them reverence, fear, and the ultimate cost of unchecked corruption. It taught them that holiness without grace burns everything. So they worship endlessly, not just in praise, but in remembrance, because they saw what happens when the unholy tries to dwell among the holy. And they saw what God had to do. The death never written down became a law etched into their very being. When they look at us, fragile, fallen, but forgiven, they see the miracle of mercy that was never offered to the first. This profound truth isn't preached in sermons or taught in seminaries, not because it's forbidden, but because it's buried, lost in veiled metaphors and apocryphal whispers, in the silence of heaven itself. The death of that first being wasn't just a loss. It was a fracture, a scar that even Scripture only hints at. Yet that silence is louder than thunder. It speaks of the cost of being near God without being truly one with Him. The first death wasn't rebellion. It was contamination. And its removal wasn't punishment. It was preservation. The destruction of something too close, too flawed, too dangerous to remain. But now we live in an age where that chasm has been bridged. Where the fire that once consumed now refines. Where mercy stands where silence once reigned. And though we still don't speak the name of the first to die, we live under the grace He never knew. That's the untold truth of heaven's history. That's why Christ matters. Not just to us, but to the heavens themselves. This untold history, the silent echo of heaven's first death, isn't meant to terrify, but to illuminate. It reveals a God whose holiness is both consuming fire and boundless grace. It underscores the profound cost of impurity and the revolutionary depth of Christ's sacrifice. A mercy so vast it bridged a chasm that once demanded annihilation. If this revelation has stirred something within you, a new understanding of cosmic stakes and divine love, don't keep it to yourself. Share this message with someone who needs to hear it, someone who yearns for truths beyond the veil. Let's ignite a conversation about the unseen depths of grace. And if you're ready to explore more hidden histories and profound insights, subscribe, turn on notifications, and join our community. What new light does this forgotten death shed on your own journey of faith?